Hello friends, so today's video is going to be another reading vlog, specifically for essentially some Abercrombie, some Robin Hobb, and some Brandon Sanderson. I mentioned at the end of my last vlog, if you saw that I'm going to be continuing on with Ship of Magic and starting Assassin's Quest. I decided I wanted to read these essentially simultaneously because while you can technically read Live Ship without reading Farseer, I was originally planning to finish all of Farseer and then starting Live Ship. But I needed a little break from Fitz, basically. And I jumped into Ship of Magic thanks to Erin and her buddy read from the channel Booked and Busy. And I'm loving Ship of Magic so much. It is so fascinating, definitely potential to be a new favorite. The world, the magic, the characters, basically everything is absolutely fantastic so far. And so I'm so glad that I jumped into it. But the reason I changed beyond just I wanted a break from Fitz is because I also wanted to read Assassin's Quest and Ship of Magic at the same time so I could catch the references between the two as opposed to finishing one and then jumping into the other and then potentially forgetting some of the tie-ins. But either way, I am excited to get to Assassin's Quest. Less so for Fitz, the main character, and more of just the continuation of building this world, this huge, massive story that Robin Hobb has interwoven different characters and magic and world-building details from one story to the next. I'm excited to get more of that, the side characters, and her writing, because her writing is fantastic. So I'll be picking up both of those. I will likely not be finishing these in this vlog. I will probably be finishing them later, but there will be a live show for Ship of Magic on Erin's channel on August 13th is the plan right now. And then no live show or anything for Farseer, but I will update you my thoughts on it when I complete the trilogy. We also have The Heroes. I'm so excited to finally be jumping into this. I've been meaning to read more of Abercrombie standalones and then jump into Age of Madness for so long. I am a little nervous about The Heroes. I've heard it's essentially one giant battle, but on the upside, I have heard from people who generally don't love giant battles for the entirety of a book that this one is amazing and that even if you're not typically a fan of that, you might still really enjoy it. So I am excited to see what happens in this. And is it silly to say I'm excited for Stephen Pacey's narration? He's just so good, and it's been so long since I've listened to one of Abercrombie's audiobooks. I will likely be doing what's called immersion reading, so I'll be reading and listening to the audiobook. But regardless, I mean, Stephen Pacey's great. The other book I'll be reading this week would be The Hero of Ages. This is my third read-through of Mistborn. I will be doing a live show for this one on August 1st, which by the time this video goes up, that live show might already be up. It's specifically for my patrons. I've been enjoying this reread tremendously, and I am a little sad that I'm now on the conclusion. And just, I said at the end of my last vlog, it's just so doom and gloom. The stakes are so high. The characters are just feeling so defeated, but they push on anyway, and it's basically everything you could ask for in a series conclusion. There's a reason that Mistborn is one of my favorite trilogies of all time. If I get the chance, I also checked out Paladins Grace from my library because it's by T. Kingfisher, who wrote Nettle and Bone, which I loved, one of my favorite books I've read this year. And then I also read What Moves the Dead, which I didn't love as much, but more so just because that one is more of a spooky, atmospheric read. It's a retelling of the fall of the House of Usher. So I enjoyed that one, but Nettle and Bone I loved so much. But regardless, every time I go to my used bookstores, I look for T. Kingfisher. And they sometimes have Nettle and Bone. I recently saw What Moves the Dead at one of them, but they don't have anything else. And I'm like, gosh darn it, because I know they've written a lot of other works and I would like to read more of her works. And so I was like, I'm just going to check it out from the library. So if I can, I might try to pick this one up also. From the two books that I've read by T. Kingfisher, I do think that they're very readable. That sounds stupid, but you just can fly through them, and they tend to not be really dense and intense world building or anything like that, so I wouldn't feel too overwhelmed adding this alongside the other books, but it is sort of a we'll see situation with that one.
Hello, little bear. Hello. Oh, you want some pets? You want some pets? Do you want a snacky? Show me where they are. Luna, sit. Sit. Stay. Paw. Good. Other paw. Other paw. Good job. There you go. Good job, Luna Bear.
Reading update and a little bit of confession time. So my plan was I have all these green tabs set up in Ship of Magic and then also Assassin's Quest. I mentioned that I wanted to read them simultaneously so that I could try and pick up on some of the references from one series to the next. But I've just been so sucked in to Ship of Magic, just not been able to contain myself. I've just consistently wanted to keep reading. I really like Ship of Magic a lot, which probably is pretty clear given that I just said I couldn't contain myself and I had to keep reading. I want to give some non-spoiler thoughts for a bit, and then I want to give some spoiler thoughts, and when I do that, I'll have a timestamp that you can skip ahead if you don't want spoilers. And of course, we will chat spoilers in the live show for the entire book, but there's just a couple of moments that have happened that were so, sorry, this chair is squeaky, that are so satisfying, and I have to talk about them. And they're the moments that I'm sure a lot of you also flipped out about when you read them. So I just need to talk about them. But regardless, non-spoiler thoughts first. So Ship of Magic's world is fascinating, and I think that the way the magic is done is so cool because it's not necessarily, or at least thus far, it's not really a magic system. It's more of like there are magical elements to the world, there's magical components to the world, and then how the world has utilized those components is what makes it really unique. So I just read The Hero of Ages. I finished that up. Loved it. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But there's a very clear magic system in Sanderson's worlds. And there's rules and limitations, and the characters use the magic as in they have their own magical powers that they're active. And in this, there are magical somewhat systems, I guess you could say, and there's different kinds of magic. But the way that it's incorporated in Ship of Magic, it's very much, as far as the ships go, it has to do with the people on the fronts of the ships that are made of something called wizard wood. I mentioned this in my previous vlog too. And it's crafted from this special kind of wood. And then after certain family members who have been with these ships for a long time have died, then the pieces of these people that have been carved, they come to life, hence the name live ships. And they guide the ships, they let them know when there's an incoming storm and why they should avoid certain waters and things like that. So they are very much not attacked, they are protected, and they are looked out for by these beings on the fronts of these ships. And that to me is so fascinating and just such a cool thing to the world. But on top of that, it does mean that the culture of the world is very influenced, their economy is very influenced by these ships. And I've found that the rest of it just feels very character driven because there isn't really this plot line that's pushing everything forward. There's this element to the story that's significant, but it's really the characters that are a big deal. And man, have I not been this into the family drama in any other book in so long. It's not like anything super intense is happening. It's just people being sneaky and manipulative and things like that. And I don't know what it says about me and a lot of you, because I know you love Ship of Magic too. I don't know what it says about us that we're like, oh, it's so good. But it's really good. So those are my non-spoiler thoughts. I am on page 547, so I got way ahead of where I was planning on getting to, and as a result, that means I have not even started Assassin's Quest. I'm going to start it tonight, and I'll probably read up to one of my tabs, maybe two. Getting into the spoilers, I wanted to mention the couple scenes I wanted to mention from this, though, and then I'll have that timestamp so you can skip ahead if you don't want these spoilers, but alright. I mentioned in my... Okay, spoilers are about to happen, just to be clear. So I mentioned in my previous vlog that I'm loving Wintro, and then I was a little scared because I'm like, what if Wintro turns out to be horrible? And what if he goes down this really terrible trajectory and he becomes the most despicable character? And I don't know, maybe he will. Thus far, he's still my favorite character. And when he calmly tells off his dad, it's not really telling off, but it's more of just he's asserting himself. And when he does this to his dad after what happens with his finger, / during what happens with his finger, oh my gosh, I loved that moment. I loved that moment so much. So specifics in case you're fuzzy on it. As a result of working on this ship, Wintrow has damaged his finger. And his father has definitely been very cruel to him. He does not care whatsoever for what his son desires for himself, what his son wants for his future. He is just my way or the highway. Some of the individuals that are working on the ship also sort of pick on Wintrow, and they all have their views of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a sailor on this ship. And they're trying to push that on Wintrow, and he's trying to continue being the individual that he was taught to be in his studies on how to be a priest. And so he's trying to be calm, he's trying to be empathetic, he tries to be understanding, and none of them want anything to do with that. They're trying to, sometimes figuratively, but literally sort of beat that out of him. And he is preserving that. So that already is very satisfying, I think, to see a character sort of hold true to what they believe is the best way to behave, the best way to be, especially when it's a character that values kindness and empathy so much. I love that. But, it was just so tasty when his finger has been damaged. That's not the tasty part. But when his finger has been damaged and he tells his father, I need it to be cut off. It is infected and that infection is going to spread to the rest of my hand. And his dad is clearly kind of grossed out and he tells his father, well, I would really appreciate if you would do it. His father's like, no. And because you can tell he's disgusted by it. And so already I feel like Wintrow is getting this moment just by being like, oh, well, I didn't realize you didn't have the stomach for it. And I was like, yes. And then it just kept getting better. That scene just kept getting better because then his finger does get cut off and he's like he's holding it in and you can only imagine how painful it is and it's described disgustingly, appropriately disgusting. And then when the finger is cut off, his dad at first is all proud of him because he's like, oh, look at my son being all tough or whatever. But Wintrow turns around and he says, I'm not a coward. I'm not a coward. I'm not big. I don't claim to be strong, but I'm neither a weakling nor a coward. I can accept pain when it is necessary. And then this is when his dad looks pleased and his dad says, you are a haven, which is the dad's family side. And then when Wintrow replies, he says, I'm a vestrit, which is his maternal side. He says, I'm a vestrit. You've made me a vestrit. What did my grandmother say? Blood will tell. Yes. And then he stoops to the deck and picks up his severed finger. And then he looks it over and then he holds it out to his dad. And he says, this finger will never wear a priest's signet. Will you take it, sir, as a token of your victory? Oh my gosh. I loved that moment because such a big thing is that his father's like, you look like a woman with those robes. And he's always just speaking poorly of everything Wintrow's been taught, everything Wintrow aspires to in his priesthood. And his father's like, that's no profession for a son of mine and everything. So that moment where he's just like, claim your victory is great. It was so well done. And it's just a great example of somebody having this quiet victory, but also a very powerful one because other people are on the ship and other people are witnessing this happen. And you're like, that's right, Wintrow. And then the other scene that I liked, also another family drama scene, has to do with Malta, who, by the way, is currently insufferable. But I think that she's sort of realistically insufferable because she is spoiled. Her father clearly tries to use her against Kefria, and that is so obnoxious when she's like, I want a pretty dress. I want to wear a woman's dress. I'm a woman now. And the mom's like, no, you're not. And the dad's like, oh, well, if it's becoming on her and if it looks good on her, then we should have her wear that. And you're like, ew. Anyway, and a refresher, if you don't quite recall, Malta wants to be presented as a woman to this one sort of festival that is being held in their town. But to be presented in that way is to say, I'm ready to have marriage proposals. And she's 12, so she's definitely not ready, but she thinks she is. Kefria, her mother, she's been so passive, and anytime there's any difficult decision to be made, she's just always like, oh, I can't handle the stress. And you're like, come on, you just want to shake her and be like, yes, you can, get a backbone. So anyway, Malta thus far, while annoying, I'm excited to see where her character goes because she's 12, she's a kid. And Kefria, though, I'm also excited to see where her character goes because of this moment. Kefria definitely lets her husband run things, and he is cruel and manipulative, and he's so unkind, and he does not care about what anyone else has to say. And for so long, Keffria's just let that pass, and she's, I think in this moment, this is going to be sort of a turning point for her. I don't know for a fact. That's just my predictions right now. But Malta, as annoying as she is, this moment where she says to her mother in regards to wanting to, like, live her life and be a woman now, she tells her mom, if you had the chance to have, you know, been able to present yourself as a woman and live as a woman for longer rather than as a little girl, she says, maybe you would have had a life, but no, I bet you've always been mousy and silent and obedient like a cow, shown one year and wed the next like a fine fat cow taken to auction. One season of dancing and fun and then married off to have babies with whatever man offered the best bargain to your parents. And that already, I was like, oh my gosh. And that's what I mean by the family drama is just you're like, oh, because all she said was some kind of mean things, but I'm like, oh my gosh, how could she? And it's not like, it just really shows how words can cut so deep. And she continues and says, that's not what I want, Mother. I want a life of my own. I want to wear pretty clothes and go to wonderful places. I don't want to marry some nice trader boy you pick out for me. I want to visit, and she lists some places in the book. And then she says, and not as a married woman with a string of babies following me. I want to be free of all of that. I want, and then the grandmother, who I love, the grandmother says, you want to ruin us. So I also like the grandmother in that scene. I really like her character. But another element, another layer to this scene beyond just the relationship between Keffria and her daughter is the fact that when you learn more about the character Althea, you realize, well, this was probably maybe what Althea was like when she was younger. And Althea is currently presented to you as this character you're kind of rooting for. She seems a little petulant at times. She seems a little thick-headed at times, but you're ultimately kind of rooting for her. But you see through Malta that this was probably what Althea was like as a kid, which is informing your views of how everybody else treats her now. So I just feel like there's all these layers to it. Anyway, I'm excited to see where everything goes from here. All right, now finally moving on to something else. So I mentioned if I had the time, I was going to try to pick up Paladins Grace, and I did. And this was very cute. Everything so far that I've read by T. Kingfisher is so drastically different from the other. So Nettle and Bone is still my favorite. And What Moves the Dead is a reimagining of The Fall of the House of Usher, and it's kind of horror fantasy. So that one is just so very different from Nettle and Bone, which is more of like a grim fairy tale. Paladins Grace is a fantasy romance, which I think I knew, but I didn't realize just how heavy on the romance it was going to be. And the fantasy components I really like. So it says Stephen's god died on the longest day of the year, and now he is trying to learn how to live without his god. And in this world, they had literal gods that they knew existed, and his died, and he describes it as feeling like you've had like your core taken out of you. And kind of a cool world building thing is he was this soldier, this holy soldier who every now and then his god would essentially possess and give him superhuman strength, him and these other soldiers. And then when the fighting was over, it would take that out. And it was always very, just kind of fighting. And he was very chivalrous and things like that. And then when his god died, there's some details I don't want to give away too much because I think it's sort of a character growth, getting to know the character sort of moment. But the aftermath of the god dying, but the remnants of the fact that that can still happen to them, these berserker modes can still happen to them without the check of the god, what that resulted in is pretty devastating. And so already I was like, wow, this world is so cool. I really liked the character, the main character, Stephen. I really liked how kind and considerate he is of other people. He's very protective of people. And the love story component is that he meets this woman who is a perfumer, and that's her passion, but that she's clearly got a past, and she has tried to sort of make something for herself through her skills as a perfumer. And he meets her, and then the plot kind of gets going from there. And it's somewhat meandering. It's not necessarily like we have this big bad to go after, and I would say the biggest plot thread of the book comes kind of later. But what I really like so far about the Kingfisher books I've read is the characters are actual adults in the story. And I find with a lot of, regardless if it's young adult or adult, so many of the characters are still really, really young. And I know I'm young too. It's not like I'm like, oh, it's so great to finally see myself represented or anything, but it's just nice to read about grown people. So the main character in this is a little shy of 40, and the woman also, she's been divorced. Something clearly has gone on with her previous marriage, and just, you don't see that explored in fantasy too often. So I definitely highly recommend this if you do like fantasy romance. Because I got so caught up in Ship of Magic, I did not complete the Heroes. Today, I started it today. I've read up to part 1, which is, let me check the page, 101 pages in. And I plan to finish this very soon, within this week, because I do want to jump into Red Country this month. So far, I am liking the Heroes less than Best Served Cold, which is the first of Joe Abercrombie's standalones in this world. This one, so far, it's sort of the lead up to a battle, and you are already getting some action scenes. You also get characters from First Law, and so there is a nostalgia factor almost, because if you like the Northmen from First Law, you are going to get them in this. There's also a character whose name I don't want to say, because I almost think it's a spoiler to say that character is still alive, because you never know who's going to live and who's going to die in books. But there's a character who plays a big role in, I would say, the themes of First Law. And a big theme of First Law is, does anything ever really change? We think we have control over our own lives, and then all along, we're sort of just having strings pulled by a puppeteer. So a character that plays a role in those themes, that character had an appearance in this, and I was like, oh my gosh, look who it is. And I thought that was really fun. But I'm still not loving this, just because it feels like, I mean, I'm surprised it's as long as it is, because it's so many different pieces, all kind of, thus far anyway, pushing toward something big. And I'm not the biggest fan of tons of action, so I'm not really that invested in those moments. And then also we're going from so many different characters, and I know it's just going to be one book. It's not like we're going to get these characters for a really long time. So we'll see how I feel about it later as I read on, but enjoying it, just not loving it. I think I'm appreciating it though for what it contributes to Abercrombie's world. Last to talk about, we have The Hero of Ages, the third book in the First Era Mistborn trilogy. So I just did today a fun spoiler-filled chat with a couple of my friends for my patrons, and we did a little live show. That was so fun. So if you're interested in seeing a bunch of spoiler thoughts and a spoilery discussion for this trilogy, I'll have my Patreon linked. But regardless, I thought with it, I can't say a whole lot because, of course, it's the third book in a series, and I don't want to go into spoilers for this. But I thought that the third time reading it, I would not be so emotionally devastated, but I was again. I almost started crying, and I had a moment. My husband's gone for a work trip, and I'm like, I could just cry right now, nobody's around. I'm not only am I not a big crier, but I'm definitely not a crier in front of other people, which is probably not the healthiest habit, but I hate crying in front of other people. It makes me uncomfortable. So my husband's gone, and I was like, I could just let it out. I could let it out. And I was like, no, you have things to do. Go clean. And I didn't cry, but man, I almost did. It's just, the ending just gets me, but other moments in the book got me that have never gotten me in the previous two reads. There's just a couple of parts. There's a part where a character, they just are done and they've given up. And then another character shows up right in that moment. And I don't know what it was. There's just something about seeing a character finally hitting the end and they were done. And then having something come into their life and give them the boost they needed, that little nudge. Oh my gosh, I'm getting all choked up talking about it, being all pathetic right now. But that kind of moment where there's just this little, finally something. It's not actually little, it's in reality, it's monumental. It's tremendous and it's remarkable that these little moments can pop up in someone's life and just give them what they need. And like I said, I keep saying the word little, but it's really, the impact is not little whatsoever. And so this moment where this character just gives up and then this other thing comes in, I was so emotional at that part. And man, just this trilogy, this third read through, there's just always something else. There's always another secret. There's just always something else for me to be all just choked up over, and I love it. There's a reason that I, for the longest time, was like, it's my favorite trilogy of all time, and whenever I mention another new favorite, I often am like, it's probably tied with Mistborn, because nothing can trump Mistborn. It just can't. Nothing can beat it. Things can tie it. I can love something just as much, but it's a different kind of love, you know, apples and oranges, but nothing will ever beat Mistborn for me. But anywho, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I will update you on the rest of my reading in future videos for the books that I have not yet completed. I hope you're having a great day though, and I'll see you all later. Bye.